Hey everybody, it's Zahava. Welcome back to the channel. We are going to be doing a reading vlog catch up today, which I am super excited to do. Now I know that I had told you guys a little while ago that I would be doing sort of a December, January reading vlog catch up and show you guys all the books that I have read, you know, throughout that period. However, my schedule has kind of gotten a little away from me, as you may imagine. And right now we're actually still in December as I'm filming. And I have like already all these books to talk to you guys about, plus a couple of things on Audible. And I also read a book on NetGalley, an advanced reader's copy that I wanted to talk to you guys about. So I think that the best way to sort of tackle this is just to do a sort of reading vlog catch up, let you guys know where I have ended up in my reading, or where I've gotten to, I should say, in my reading. And then we'll just sort of go through until my videos can sort of catch up and get more recent, which, as you know, I have been trying to accomplish for some time. And yeah, so let's just kind of see where we are in terms of the books that I have read and am reading. So in no particular order, let us start with the books in this pile. Now, I managed to finish in about 2 or 3 days The Tattooist of Auschwitz, and this book is actually the first book I've ever read that is really Holocaust-centric, that takes place, you know, during the Second World War, and it was, I think, a very good introduction to the subject matter. It read relatively quickly. It's based on a true story about, you know, Lale, who becomes the tattooist in Auschwitz and meets his bride Gita there, and, you know, just how they have a romance in spite of terrible circumstances, and, you know, how they go about making their escape from the concentration camp. And I honestly thought that this book was going to be a lot more gory than it was, and I was really surprised to find that it was handled with a lot of grace, and it wasn't as graphic as I thought that, as I feared that it was going to be. So I really enjoyed this book. It had been on my TBR for some time, and I was listening to Bookish Dad Reads on YouTube, and he had just finished reading this book and recommended it. So given as it was like on my TBR already, I already had the physical copy of it. I had purchased it some time ago at Book Outlet, I think. So I decided to pick it up, and I really enjoyed this one. So I believe that I gave it 4 stars. And if you guys are looking for a book that just takes you through a sort of, it is historical fiction, but it's based on a true story. And they do have at the back of the book, at least in my edition, they have some like postscript that has some facts and some photos. Let me see if I can show you, if I can find them. And like my edition has, you know, some photos and things like that of Lale and Gita, and, you know, so it just, like, for me, it was a nice read, a good introduction to Holocaust topic. I don't know if Holocaust books are generally very graphic, but I was afraid they would be. And I'm glad that this author didn't play with my emotions too much. Overall, really good read, and I was happy with it. So that's what I read. Took me like 2 days. I also finally finished The Princess Bride. Now, this one is going to spark a little controversy. The movie was way better than the book. Way better. The book was funny. At some points, Goldman does break the fourth wall. He's talking to you directly, the reader. He's very funny, but I found myself, honestly, quite honestly, skipping a lot of text. I was skipping a lot of text. The whole situation with the underground level zoo that is going on there really was not necessary. Was not necessary, could have done without. I understand why they cut the whole thing when they did the movie. So if you guys want to know what I'm talking about, you'll have to read the book. But basically, well, actually, I could probably tell you if you haven't read the book. Humperdinck, the prince that's in this story, apparently has a zoo very like The Most Dangerous Game, where like he goes out hunting. You know, The Most Dangerous Game, I think it's a story by Shirley Jackson, and he goes out hunting, and it's kind of like Hunger Games is like loosely based on The Most Dangerous Game. And I feel like, I don't know if it's Shirley Jackson, I'm gonna have to look it up, but anyway, there's this like 5-level zoo that's attached somehow to the castle, and Humperdinck goes and like hunts beasts and man and stuff like that, and then they have this whole dungeon where in the movie you see Wesley being tortured. I think that like Fezzik and Inigo have to like make their way through this maze, or it's like an underground jungle of like different levels of trials and stuff. Anyway, it was just so boring. It was so boring and so unnecessary that I think we could have skipped a good chunk of this book, like maybe 15% of it, 15% shorter would have covered that area for me. And I just didn't really enjoy that whole section of the novel. So it lost a few stars for me, and I ended up rating it like a 3-star just because I felt like it was really wordy and didn't really need to be as long as it was. And again, I had the 40th anniversary edition, so there was an introductory text for the there was like an introductory essay for the 40th anniversary, and that was in addition to the introductory text for the 30th anniversary of this book, which was also included. So I skipped those, and I actually also skipped the last chapter, which was Buttercup's baby, because by then I just didn't care anymore. And that's like, as you guys know, the absolute worst thing. Like when you stop caring about what's going on in the novel, yeah, I was just really disappointed. I wanted this book to be so much more than it was. And aside from laughing here and there, which is kind of the reason I gave it 3 stars and not 2 stars, and like a little bit for nostalgia's sake, because in my mind when I was reading it, I was thinking Andre the Giant, I was thinking Mandy Patinkin in my head, and all the characters and actors that you see in the movie, and that kind of saved it for me. But I will say that as for Mad Max and his wife, I think it's Valerie in the novel, who was played by Carol Kane in the movie, she actually had a much better part, like way more fleshed out in the novel. So I will say that for the novel, that you got a much better, more rounded idea of her character in the novel than you did in the movie. And she wasn't like so spastic in the novel as she's presented and played in the movie. But ultimately, I would say that the movie is better. So do yourselves a favor, skip the book. Skip the book. The next print book that I finished was Shadow of the Gods. Now, this was my first introduction into the John Gwynne writing style universe. I know that John Gwynne has been around for something like 20 years or so, but it's just like not an author that I've ever come across or picked up. I just did a video a little while ago talking about 15 fantasy authors that I have never read. John Gwynne had made it onto the list, but finally I can say that I have read one of his books, and I just loved it. I loved it so much that I actually, after finished reading it, and I have the 2 others that go with this, and I also purchased from Amazon because they were having like a Boxing Day special. So I purchased all 4 books of The Faithful and the Fallen, starting with Malice and going through the rest of them that I can't remember right now, in a box set. So I know that I'm going to be reading those. I don't know if I'll get to them this year because it's quite a lot of reading, and I have a lot of reading that I need to be doing this year. But I did pick up, now knowing that I enjoy John Gwynne's writing style and storytelling, I picked up some books of his that I knew were on special and that I knew I was going to read and definitely want to keep. I'm really enjoying his writing. I find the writing super accessible. The pages turn really, really easily. It's an epic storytelling such that the first novel ends and it leaves you on kind of like a springboard to what the next novel is meant to be. So I'm really happy about that, because for me sometimes it's hard when I'm reading epic fantasy to read a book where each book in the series is its own complete story, and I would rather have an overarching storyline so that I can go from book 1 to 3 as opposed to doing book 1 standalone, book 2 standalone, book 3 standalone. I like when things are starting in like a slow burn in book 1 and then moving over to book 3 before you get your conclusion, which I know that sometimes book 2 can be like a little dragging on depending on how the story is written or divulged. But generally speaking, I prefer when things take a long time and are a slow burn. So I like this book so much that I actually went ahead and ordered a copy on Audible as well, so the audio copy as well. And that is because when I'm cooking or working or even stretching, which I should probably do after recording this video, I want to be able to listen to the book, and having just finished reading it and reading it in my mind's eye, it's also like a different experience. I don't know if you guys are like this also, but sometimes when you read the book, it's one experience, and then when you re-listen to it and you do kind of like your reread, you do it on Audible. And if you guys have been here a minute, you guys know that I have a really hard time with a fiction novel that, or basically anything that isn't memoir or isn't nonfiction, to listen to it a first go round on Audible. For some reason, it like always ruins the story for me. But having read this book and knowing already what is transpiring and then listening to it again on audio, totally different experience for me. Like, it's actually even a better, more enriching experience for me. And certainly when it comes to listening to books on audio. So I don't know if you guys are the same as me, if you find that you get a different experience reading the book than you do listening to it when you do listen to it. But if you have any comments to that effect, let me know down below in the comments section, because I always find that listening to a book and reading a book could be two totally different experiences. So I am really, really happy with this. I'm looking forward to reading the next one, but I do have so many other books on my reading list right now that I think I'm gonna wait until I'm finished the second playback through audio, and then I'll probably go into the next one in the series. Also on audio, I listened to 34 Years in Hell by Jamie Morgan Kane, and that was a fantastic read. I mean, I listened to the audio version, but it was absolutely fantastic. This is a story that I think personally everybody should be reading or listening to. It is about a man who basically had everything stacked against him. Like, the universe was stacked against him from the moment that he was born. He was stolen, sold, brought over illegally to North America. First he landed in Canada, then he went to the United States, and he lived his entire life in the United States illegally. He was born originally on the Isle of Man in the Irish Sea, and it's just basically how a story about how the justice system sort of ensnared him and kept him through various bits of red tape and policy change and just things that were completely outside of his control in prison from what was supposed to originally be a 13-year sentence that turned into 34 years in the American prison system. And the amount of resilience and the amount of, you know, stamina that it took for him to survive everything that he survived in that horrific situation is just something that I think that everybody needs to read about and know about. And it's not like, you know, he was innocent. First of all, I just want to say he was innocent of the crime, or at least he claims to be innocent in this book. But I kind of like believe him. I kind of believe him. I want to say that when I was finished reading the book, I almost like wanted to reach out to the author and be like, wow, you have really survived something that no one should ever have to survive. You know, being abandoned by your mother, being stolen, being like, it's just like, there's so many things. Like, how I think I wrote in my Goodreads review of this novel that they should retitle it Murphy's Law, because essentially everything that can go wrong in the universe literally happened to this guy. So I would say it's an excellent read. If you guys want to know what happened to Jamie Morgan Kane, definitely go ahead and get yourself a copy of this book. You won't regret it. For me, it was a 5-star read. So now I'm going to talk to you about a book that I listened to on NetGalley. So I got a copy of the Life Cycle of the Common Octopus on NetGalley as an advanced reader's copy. And I started out, it's not gonna be a good review, you guys. I started out really liking it. And I was like, okay, I could get behind this book because I'm Canadian, and it's written by a Canadian author who's based in Toronto, and the protagonist of the story is a Canadian who goes over to study in Edinburgh, I don't know. She goes over to Scotland to study in uni there, and I thought that kind of resonated with me a little bit because my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was actually a Scottish immigrant to Canada and married into my father's family when his mother passed away. And they needed a nanny. It was kind of like a Jane Eyre or like The Sound of Music situation where like the nanny marries into the family, and that's how like I knew my grandmother, because she like lived through the same situation. She came over as an immigrant to take care of the children and then married into the family. So So I felt an immediate connection and resonance with this story just based on the Canadian-Scottish kind of like crossover that was going on. But in the end, there was something about the prose that didn't really resonate with me. Like I found myself kind of eye-rolling, cringing a little bit, not loving the gratuitous references to Quebec politics, which I think need to be handled with kid gloves whenever you're talking about Quebec politics. And I just didn't love the casual, like I get it that Scottish people want their independence, but don't compare it to Quebec politics, please. Like don't, there's nothing that compares to Quebec politics. And I don't even want to discuss it on this channel because it really irritates me and aggravates me. But the point is that the author could have done, like made her point without casually referencing that. And I think that when she did in the novel, that's what lost me, because I know that the author is based in Toronto and she couldn't possibly understand what the Anglophone community has to go through in my province. So I just want to say that. And it's not just the Anglophone community. It has to do with like people's agency and abilities to make choices, whether they're Anglophone, Allophone, or Francophone. And that's all I'm going to say about that topic. You guys can do your own research. But the author lost me when she said something to do, when she made a reference to Quebec politics in her novel, and that's when I DNFed it. That's when I DNFed it. And I think that I ended up giving it like a 2-star review. And I feel like I was being generous because at some point the writing got sloppy and then it didn't really like, I think that probably people are going to pick up this book because it's called The Life Cycle of the Common Octopus, and people are going to they're going to sort of like compare it to Remarkably Bright Creatures, and it really has nothing to do with octopuses at all. So I don't know. I really, and also I feel like I was lied to, okay? The summary of the book, it purports to be about relationships between friends and women and family, and I just really did not get that idea at all. Really what it was like reliving somebody's first year of college and going through whatever they would go through in their first year, and it's kind of like wants to be a book about found family, but it doesn't end up being that way, and it gets like a little predictive, and I don't know, I just didn't like the book at all, so it did not get a good review for me. But it is coming out in January. It should be out now when you guys see the video, so I mean, you know, use your discretion, guys, but I didn't like it. I did up to a point, and then it lost my interest, and I felt like the plot was just trying to truck on, you know, and it really wasn't pulling me in very well. So I did not like The Life Cycle of the Common Octopus, and I don't know, it was just not very compelling to me. I'm sorry about that. All right, the next book that I also DNF'd, you guys are going to be, it's going to spark some debate. I'm prepared for it, but I DNF'd Beach Read by Emily Henry, who, as I understand, is the undisputed queen of romance novels from what I hear. I just could not get into it, and I don't know, it actually sparks a question in my mind because I don't actually know if it's because I'm just not a romance girly or if it's because I read the wrong romance. So you guys are going to have to help me out with this because I really don't know. I don't know if it's a question of me not being a romance girl or if this is just an author that I don't resonate with or if it's just the subject that I don't resonate with. I will tell you exactly why I DNF'd this book at, I'll tell you, 85 pages in. I DNF'd it because the romance felt contrived and forced to me. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, but I guess that I guess for me, I actually don't know if romances are supposed to be this way or if it's just the construction of this particular novel. So I'm going to have to rely on your guys' commentary to sort of set my head right. But I felt like the romance was kind of being forced. Like this girl inherits a house from her deceased father and she goes to live in that house until she can sell it. And her next door neighbor happens to be her college crush. Like I roll, you know, like I could not, I mean, And then they get like forced into the same book club together, and then they decide within the first 30 or 40 pages that they're going to have a competition to see who can write a novel in the other one's genre or specialty. And I was like, oh my God, what a boring, I could not bring myself to be interested in this storyline whatsoever. I want to say, okay, before the internet hates me, it could just be because I am not a romance girl, or it could be that I don't like the particular structure of the way that this book was put together. I want to say that, like, okay, so I just want to be clear. I am a huge fan of romance in novels, but I'm a huge fan of romance in novels when it's presented in a particular way, as in, when there's one character, male character, female character, queer characters, whatever, when there's one character and we get to know that one character independently of the other character, and we get to, and vice versa, and then we get to see these characters grow. We get to know them, we get to fall in love with them, we get to see their strengths, we get to see their weaknesses, and then once we have fallen in love with them, for them to discover one another, and then we have that big catharsis where we're like, yes, finally, these two are banging, you know, then I can totally get behind that. I can get behind that because independently, I have fallen in love with either one of them, which is something that you see in Live Ship Traders, again, by Robin Hobb. It is a very slow burn. And you get to see two of, I'm not going to say who they are, but two of my favorite characters who are point of view characters. And because they're point of view characters, you get to know all about them, and you get to learn all about them independently from those two characters being with each other. And that is what I love. And then when you finally see them get together and you finally see it through each of their points of view, it just gives you so much more fodder to chew your cud over. And that I could really, really get behind. When I feel like maybe it's just the difference between having a fantasy novel and a romance novel, and maybe it's just a difference in the genres that I'm unaware of, but when I see characters being forced into a situation and we don't know anything about them as individuals, as who they are, when we're introduced to their coupling in the story, and we're meant to be convinced that they're good people worthy of a relationship and be shipping them when they don't even know who each other is, like, and they're getting to know each other as we're getting to know them, I don't find the stakes are high. Like, I haven't invested of myself into this couple. I don't know anything about this couple. And I really can't get behind that. Like, why should I care? Why should I care? What have I invested of myself into these characters as individuals in order to care whether or not they're happy at the end of the story? So I know that might be a very controversial opinion, but I don't know if I'm meant to be reading romance novels or if I've just picked up the wrong one. Like, maybe there are romance novels that are more of a slow burn where we do get to meet the characters individually and fall in love with them separately from one another before they get to know each other and come together as a couple. Maybe that does exist, but this book was not it. So if you guys know of a book like that I should be reading that will give me what I need, then I will be willing to still entertain the romance genre. But until then, I'm just going to call myself not a romance girly. And in that spirit, I am going to unhaul I Kissed a Girl because I feel that just based on the cover, it's going to give me the same thing as Beach Read, and I can just save myself the trouble. And I also have Better Than the Movies, which I know is also a romance book, and I believe a very popular one that people have really liked, but I am so scared to waste my time on this. So let me know if between this and this, it is a slow burn. Can I meet characters and fall in love with these characters independently of each other before they come together? Let me know, because if so, I will take your advice and I will read these books. Otherwise, I think we're just going to have to abandon romance on this channel because I don't think it's going to happen. Now, that being said, I've never read a romantasy before, so I am willing and still more or less open-minded to read a romantasy book, but for now, I don't know, you guys. I'm feeling super let down because I had heard that Emily Henry was the creme de la creme of romance novelists, and I had much higher hopes than whatever it was that I got out of the 85 pages that I read of Beach Read. So please feel free in the comments to give me some words of encouragement where that genre is concerned. Okay, lastly, I want to talk to you guys about the books that I am currently reading, and hopefully I will have more information for you guys about these ones in the next reading vlog that you're going to see. But I did start Earth Abides, which I believe they are turning into a TV series. I want to say that it might be on Netflix or maybe another network, but whatever it is, it's a network that I don't have. But that's fine because I am actually enjoying this book. This is a book that I've started annotating, and I knew that I wanted to annotate this one because it's a science fiction, and I tend to like to annotate my science fiction books because they make me think, and I really appreciate that they make me think. And I'm having a really good time with this one, but I will say that it reads slow because I really feel the obligation, necessity, I feel it's necessary. There you go. There's my English. I feel it's necessary to actually read, slow down and read every single word. And I'm really liking Ish. I'm liking his character. I'm liking the way he thinks about things. And I like the compare and contrast that I make from what I imagine that I would be doing in that situation to what Ish has decided to do in his situation. And I want to say that it kind of plays out a little bit like WALL-E. Like, you know how in the beginning of WALL-E, everything is pretty silent until he gets onto the spaceship, and then you start to hear more noise and more action and more things going on. The book is largely atmospheric and very, very largely silent. And there's like maybe 5% dialogue. But then again, I'm only 123 pages in so far, but so far any dialogue has largely been Ish talking to himself. So really not a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of exposition and a lot of you learning what is going through Ish's mind. So basically, if you guys don't know anything about this story, it is a guy that gets bitten by a rattlesnake, and he kind of crawls into a cabin to convalesce. And whenever he wakes up and the world is basically vanished. Like, nobody is left on the planet. There's been this epidemic that's come across the US where like people have vanished from the cities and towns. Lots of people have died, and there's been a few survivors, and Ish is basically trying to go around figuring out who has survived this epidemic, and he doesn't know why he survived either, possibly because he was isolated nursing the rattlesnake bite, but like people don't really survive rattlesnake bites as far as I know. So, and he was out in the woods alone, kind of like doing his own self-doctoring. And yeah, so I'm only just like 122 pages into this book, but I am enjoying it. It's, again, very dystopian kind of feel, atmospheric, and I don't know what happens in the rest of the novel because I haven't made it there yet, but so far so good. I'm enjoying this one. The next book that I am reading that I've started is The Ladies of the Secret Circus. Now, I don't know why, but I had no idea that this book was magical realism. So The Ladies of the Secret Circus has to do with a lady named Lara whose husband disappears on their wedding day, just mysteriously disappears. And she has to kind of figure out what happened to him. And she is I guess a witch. She has like magical powers. You get to hear this pretty much in the first page or second page of the novel. You get to know that she already has magical powers. She's standing in front of a mirror trying on a wedding dress and talking to the fabric basically, and talking to the dress and telling it to make certain alterations because she doesn't like the way it looks. And apparently this is hereditary because her mother comes in and then also makes some alterations to the dress using magic. And so there's a lot of magic lore and circus history in her family, and just really kind of spooky magical things that are happening. And when I bought this book, I had no idea that it was going to be like magical realism fantasy. So I'm really enjoying it. I can't really tell you much more about the book because I'm not too far into it. I think I'm only up to like chapter 8 or something, but basically when Lara is getting married to this guy that she's been like high school sweethearts with, he kind of goes missing on their wedding day, echoing a disappearance of someone 25 or 30 years prior that also disappeared on the same day. So we know for sure as a reader that there's a connection between the two disappearances and the circus that is magically hidden in the forest where these two men were last seen parked in front of. So their cars were basically pulled over over to the side of the road. They parked their cars and then kind of disappeared in front of this forest where previously a circus had been set up and is no longer there. So I don't really know what's going to happen in the plot of the story, but I'm really liking where it's going. I have zero education about whatever else is happening, but I'm really liking it so far. And I like to sort of change up my reading a little bit between sci-fi, fantasy, and regular literary fiction. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about as my last book in this reading vlog update, and this is Shmutz. So I'm reading this book currently as we're recording, and I am on page 77. And this book is about a Hasidic Jewish woman who is addicted to porn. So when I saw this, I think I saw this come across my feed, or somebody, another booktuber had suggested it. And I was like, a Hasidic Jewish woman who is addicted to porn as a storyline. Yes, please. I put that in my Amazon wish list, and then I came across it actually at a thrift store. So this cost me $3.75, and it's actually like a brand new copy. So I don't know whoever got rid of it, you made a huge mistake, because this book is fantastic. I am having such a great time. There's a whole glossary at the back of the book. So whatever Yiddish words are being used in this book, you will have a glossary that will tell you what those words mean. I am not a religious Jew, but I do have some education about the different levels of orthodoxy and some familiarity with what it means to be a Hasidic Jew and the different levels of observation, even within the Hasidic community. So it's reading really well for me and really, really easily for me because I have some knowledge, some underlying knowledge of the culture. And I can understand why the stakes are high if an 18-year-old girl, a redheaded girl, so if you're looking for books about redheads, Raisel is a redheaded girl, and that's frowned upon in her community. It'll be harder for her to find a match because she's redheaded, and they do say that in the book, but she's more worried about the fact that she's addicted to porn and will not be able to find a suitable match for that reason. And this book is, and again, I haven't finished it. I'm only about, 80 pages in, but it is a book about, it's a coming of age. It's a book about a sexual awakening. It's a book about, being an outcast, not really feeling like you fit in, even in your own community. Raisel does go to school. She's going to school to learn accounting, and she gets in with a group of goths because they're kind of like outcasts, and she kind of feels like an outcast, and they sort of welcome her in, which I love the juxtaposition between a Hasidic Jew and like a goth community. And also she works part-time for a Rebbetzin who is a widow, and she also owns like a jewelry business and a whole bunch of real estate investments. And you kind of get the feeling in the scenes where Raisel is working with the Rebbetzin that the Rebbetzin has kind of like a nefarious vibe about her so far. And I don't know how that story is going to play out with Raisel and her boss, but I kind of feel like whenever there's a scene with Raisel and the Rebbetzin, you kind of get that do-do-do-do-do-do-do feeling like she's not on the up and up. But being a business owner myself and looking at what the Rebbetzin so far has been trying to tell Raisel, such as don't get married, a girl with your brains shouldn't waste it away, things along those nature, by becoming a mother and a wife and doing all of those things that you're sort of raised as a Hasidic Jew to want for yourself. I think the Rebbetzin, I'm kind of getting the idea that she secretly would not have wanted her life because clearly she herself is very intelligent. And when she's telling this 18-year-old girl not to get married, I feel like there's a little bit of projection there. But I am loving this book so far, and I can already tell that by tomorrow this book is going to be finished, because as soon as I finish editing and uploading this video, this is what I'm going to be concentrating the rest of my week on as much as I can. So editing Zahava here. So I knew as I was recording this video that there was a book that I had forgotten to talk to you guys about, and that is 𝐿if the Unseen. Now, I really love that book. I gave that book a 4-star rating, and it was actually the first book that I took out of my public library. So I know a little while ago I was talking to you guys about reading goals and channel goals, and one of those goals was to go to my local library and take out some books more. And on December 13th, I took out 𝐄𝐌𝐿if the Unseen by G. Willow Wilson, and I just love that book so much. And I had no idea that this book had been out or was a magical realism sort of sci-fi book, a nice blend of all of those genres. But I had a really, really good time with that book. I was actually just browsing through the library shelves, and when I got to the last shelf, I said to myself, okay, I'm just gonna like pick up a random book. And something about the spine or the cover of that book kind of caught my eye. And I sat down and I read the blurb on the inside flap of the cover. And I sat down and actually read the first chapter while I was at the library, and I just loved it. So I took the book home, and it took me 2 days to finish it. So really enjoyable story about a guy in his early 20s whose girlfriend actually becomes betrothed to another man, and he is a hacker and a computer programmer. And when she asks to never hear from him again, he grants her wish by making all traces of him disappear so that she can no longer contact him or send him emails or have any trace of his existence online. And this story has to do with Arabian mythology and jinn, and the presence of jinn in the modern day world, and how the knowledge of jinn relates to computer coding and programming. And it's just a very, very interesting premise. And of course, there is a little bit of a love story involved. So this book was just checking off all of the boxes for me for fantasy and magical realism and all of those things. And I really had a good time with it. So that book, like I said, 4-star read for me, and took me 2 days to finish. And then I went back to the library. I made the mistake of going back to the library to return the book on a Sunday, but there was like no parking. It's like everyone goes to the library on a Sunday. So I will not be going to the library on a Sunday anymore, instead opting for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when probably there's going to be a lot less people there around opening. But just wanted to tell you guys that I read that book as well and had a really good time with it, and highly recommend. That pretty much brings us up to date with all of the books that I have been reading so far, and I hope you guys enjoyed this vlog update. And if you guys have any comments that you want to share, as always, please leave those down below so we can have a discussion. I really appreciate and love you guys all. If you have been here until the end of the video, you know that you are my favorite, and I will see you again in the next one. Ciao for now.